August 1997. We are getting closer and closer to a time when I can remember something from 1997. But we are not there yet. I do know that I was working at Illyria Arts in Penfield, Ohio, as a picture framer. That's about it. That's the only, I don't have anything specific from August of 1977. So we'll just get into the books. And I started the month with Moss Flower by Brian Jacques, or however you say his last name. And back in April, I had read Redwall, which was the first book in the Redwall series, while Moss Flower is a prequel to that book. And so this is when there's this wildcat is in charge. I guess before I go on, for those of you who aren't familiar with the series, didn't watch the video where I talked about Redwall, this is a fantasy world where animals, forest animals, are the main characters. But it's, Lord of the Rings, that kind of thing, but with cute little animals. So, this wildcat is basically the tyrant, the dictator of the kingdom, and cute little mouse Martin and his friends are going to try to dethrone the wildcat, free their kingdom. And in Redwall, part of the story of Redwall was these forest creatures, the mice are usually the main characters, are looking for the sword, the legendary sword of the heroic Martin. And so this is Martin's story before he was legendary. Fun forest dwelling creature fantasy. I think we're gonna have a few more books by this author in this series on my list. I haven't read the entire series, but I did read a few. I enjoyed it. But then I followed that fun little fantasy up with Dark Trail by Ed Gorman. This is a Western, and our main character, let's look at the notes, Leo Guild, and his wife has left him for a guy named Frank Evans. And years later, the wife comes back and wants Leo's help because Frank has been challenged to a gunfight, and she's worried about him, and she wants Leo to stop Frank from engaging in these shenanigans. But what's Leo gonna do? Is he gonna abide by his wife's wishes, or abide by his heart? Or his anger, I assume, at Frank. So it's Ed Gorman. It's a Western. It's good stuff. Ed Gorman was a great writer, and I don't think he was writing typical Westerns, the trope-filled things, sort of when Richard Matheson wrote his Westerns. They take the tropes and they give them a little spin and they build character. Not that there aren't classic Westerns with character. I love Shane, the book. But Ed McBain being just a fantastic writer of mysteries and thrillers and Westerns. It's a good book. All right, now we're getting into something interesting, I think. The third book that I read in August of 1997 was Twilight of the Empire by Simon R. Green. Now, Simon Green might be best known today as the author of the Nightside series, which is a really good urban fantasy, in my opinion, really good urban fantasy series. It's a little more nightmarish than some of the other urban fantasy that I've read. But back in the day, like when I read this, I knew him as the author of the Deathstalker series, which was this operatic sci-fi series. And Twilight of the Empire is the book I read is actually an omnibus of three. I don't know if they were considered novellas or novels at the time, that are sort of prequels, I think, to the Deathstalker, or at least companion pieces to the Deathstalker series. So the three books in Twilight of the Empire are Mist World, Ghost World, and Hell World. And I was in the mood. I don't know why. Maybe I'd watched Event Horizon or something. I was in the mood for science fiction with horror. And this sounded like, I had never read any Simon R. Green before, but this sounded like there was some horror elements to it. And I think there is. Basically, in each one of these stories, we have a different main character in each one, and they all, in some way, connect to the overall Deathstalker series. Either characters from Deathstalker are characters in these stories, or events, or whatever. But either way, 3 books, 3 different main characters, but essentially each one is going to a planet for some reason, and horrifying things happen on those planets. I mean, Mist World, okay, that could be, maybe you don't have to worry about that unless you've read The Mist by Stephen King. Ghost World, that sounds pretty scary. Hell World, come on. So I don't remember a huge amount about the different plots, except, as I said, the going on a mission to these different worlds, different characters going to these different worlds, horrifying, terrifying things happening. I do remember getting the fix that I was looking for. They were there. I recall some scary stuff happening in these stories, and it scratched that itch that I was looking for at this particular time. Next up, a book that needs no introduction. Starship Troopers by Robert A. Heinlein. Again, I suppose there are people that aren't necessarily familiar with this. It is a controversial book, basically about a war, at its most basic, about a war between humans and giant alien bug creatures. Possibly the movie is more well known than the book at this point. I happen to really enjoy the movie. Despite some changes from the book, I thought the book was good. I enjoyed the book well enough. I'm not a huge Heinlein fan, but I did enjoy this. And it's one of those books where some people say it's a straight up satire of fascism, and some people think it's apparently some people think it's pro-fascism. It's definitely military, or written as military propaganda, if that makes sense. But whether it's satirizing that or actually promoting that, well, apparently people are going to be arguing about that forever. I don't know. All I know is I found it to be a very interesting, thought-provoking, and entertaining book, and the movie's great. I followed that up with 80 Million Eyes by Ed McBain. This is an 87th Precinct novel, and there's a comedian named, I didn't write the name down, it doesn't matter. There's a comedian that dies on live TV, and initially it's thought to be natural causes. Turns out it's not. Steve Carella is going to investigate. That's where the 80 million eyes comes from. There were 40 million viewers. I don't know. They're assuming every viewer had two working eyes. But anyway. And then there's another story going on at the same time with a woman that survived uh, a sniper from like 3 years ago, but now she seems to be in the crosshairs. And is it Bert Kling? One of the other detectives is working on her case. Whether or not you think these books are propaganda, whether or not you are pro or anti police or neutral on the subject, these are well written books, I think, with interesting characters, and I enjoy them. I don't think they're necessarily propaganda. I don't know that it's been a while since I've read one, but I don't remember them being like rah rah police, yay. I think Ed McBain was just telling stories. I could be wrong about this. I'll have to reread some and see if my perspective has changed. But at the time, back in August of 1997, I was still enjoying the 87th Precinct novels, and I don't recall there being anything problematic. Who knows? Let's turn the page, and then we get to X-Men Smoke and Mirrors by, I'm going to apologize right up front, Eluki Bes Shahar. That's what I have written down. Don't know if that's even close to proper pronunciation. Obviously, an X-Men novel. The government has come up with a serum, a process that can reverse mutation. And of course, since the general public fears and hates mutants, the government wants to spread this process far and wide, get rid of mutants. X-Men, of course, don't want this to happen, and they discover behind the scenes Mr. Sinister. Pretty good book. As I always say, those of you who are familiar with my stuff, I'm not a huge X-Men fan. Although I did just pick up an X-Men book at Half Price Books today. A lot of it depends on the writer. Some characters I like, some characters I don't. Overall, I'm more of an Avengers, Defenders, different other characters. But the X-Men can be entertaining. And this is a decent book. Excuse me. Then, the one book I actually have a copy of, Challenger's Hope by David Fine Tuck. The second book in the Seafort saga. And in this one, basically, spoilers for the first one. So don't listen to the next 30 seconds if you don't want the first book spoiled. In the first book, humans, Nicholas Seafort in particular, made contact with aliens. First time. And now we're essentially at war. Aliens are attacking humans. All right, so once again, Nicholas Seafort is commanding a ship, transporting, this says his crew is rebellious. Wait a minute. Commander Nicholas Seafort stranded aboard a doomed ship of arrogant colonists and violent street children. His crew is rebellious. His ship short of weapons, fuel, and food. I guess there's spoilers. If you haven't read the first one, there's spoilers right there on the cover. Because there's the alien. But the second book in the series, and another fantastic addition to the series. I think this might be the one where Nicholas Seafort truly believes that he has damned himself to hell through certain actions that he takes. It's either in this one or the third one. But the part with the violent street children makes me think that it might be this one. Um, I love the world that David Feintuck has built. I love the characters. This is some of my favorite science fiction. I absolutely love this series. But we'll move on to Confessions of a Barbarian by Edward Abbey. This is a collection of, I believe, journal entries, possibly essays. Edward Abbey was an eco warrior. He wrote The Monkey Wrench Gang, Desert Solitaire. Excuse me. I think he might be considered problematic nowadays. I think I've heard some things that maybe in his personal life he wasn't the greatest person, but he was a park ranger. He was very, very pro nature, ecology. This might be the book where I read that. I don't know if this is true or not, but I love the idea of it. That when he died, his friends basically just wrapped him up in a sleeping bag, took him out into the woods, threw him in the back of a pickup truck, took him out into the woods, and buried him, I would assume. Which, if I understand it, is completely illegal. But as someone who always says that it would be so easy to just dispose of my corpse when I die. Just feed me to the wolves or sharks or whatever. Circle of life. I can get behind this whole idea that they just took him out into the woods that he loved so much. But anyway, this is a collection of essays. If you want to get into the head of Edward Abbey, again, don't know if his personal life has stood up to scrutiny, but I think his writing and his essays, I think this is really fascinating stuff. And then the final book that I read in August of 1997, another one that has connections to some problematic stuff, is Kull by Robert E. Howard. Not as popular a character as Conan. Obviously, Robert E. Howard's biggest character was Conan. I prefer Solomon Kane. I've said that many times. Regular viewers are probably tired of hearing me talk about how much I love Solomon Kane. But Kull is another cool character. He was exiled from Atlantis and then became king of another place. It's on the tip of my brain, and I can't remember what it's called. But this is just a collection of all the Kull stories. I think it has all of the Kull stories in this particular edition that I read. I don't know if there's anything longer than short stories featuring Kull. This is all from the pulps, stuff that would be published in different periodicals and such. An interesting character. I used to do these things called scratchboard. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it. You have this black, generally black board. It's essentially a sort of ink over white. Sometimes it's over a rainbow color or over a metallic surface. And you scratch. You had the special tool, and you'd scratch it and make a picture. First one I ever did was a kit. I think it was like a peregrine falcon. And the background was silver when you scratched through the black. And it actually came with, since it was a kit, came with the tool you needed and the image printed on the black, like in gray lines. And you just scratch away at the lines, and then you end up with this picture. I started making my own scratch boards. I was in art classes, and I would take, I forget what the base sort of paper, because it's not actual paper, it's a little thicker than that. And I would put ink on it, and then I would copy generally I was copying comic book pictures and stuff, and I would do sort of reverse, because with a scratch board, at least the kits that I saw, it was sort of a negative image where you're scratching away the lines that would be the lines that you would draw if you were doing a drawing. So let's say this peregrine falcon, hopefully this is going to make sense. The peregrine falcon, if I were drawing it, obviously the outline, the eyes, the feathers, all of that, I would be drawing in, we'll just say black. I'm using a pencil. I've drawn. So it's everything else is white and the image of the falcon is black. Well, with the scratch board, everything else is black. The image of the falcon, in this case, was silver. So sort of a negative. What I would do with my homemade scratch boards was I would do them so they were still a positive image. I would scratch away everything else. So you still ended up with the background and everything is white. The image is black, which could be very difficult at times because instead of simply scratching a line, I'm scratching everything so the only thing left is a line, if that makes sense. All of this is to say that I did one of these scratch boards of Cull. I took an image from, I would assume it had to be one of the Marvel comic books, and made a scratch board of Cull. I do not have these scratch boards anymore. I do have pictures of them somewhere. Actually, it's quite possible. All right, this video is going a little long because I've been rambling. But you know what? I am going to take a quick detour because I think I actually have these in their own album on Facebook. There we go. All right. So this isn't going to be the best, especially since it's a horrible blurry picture to begin with. Okay, this one I kind of lied about how I did it. Well, here, I'll show you this one. Again, super blurry. This is going to be horrible. This is a Solomon Kane scratch board that I did. And you can see all of that white is what I scratched away, and the black is the ink that's left. But I did, being the big fat liar that I am, apparently, well, I kind of did the same. Ish. I did leave a lot of black background, but I still, again, not a very good picture. We get a lot of reflection, and even if you could see it without all the reflection, it's super blurry. I took the picture like 3-4 generations ago on my phone. But anyway, there's Cull. Just me rambling and talking about the scratch board I did of Cull. But I was a big fan of the character. Not as much as Solomon Kane or Conan, but still pretty cool. And that, all of that rambling is because the last book I read in August of 1997 was Cull by Robert E. Howard. All right, so that's it. I think that's a decent mix. I got sci-fi and mystery and fantasy and non-fiction, all sorts of stuff. A little bit of horror sci-fi. Which brings me to my question for this video. What are your thoughts on horror sci-fi? I don't remember that if I've asked this before. Really, I've mentioned this before. I think I should make a list of the questions I ask to try to avoid repeating myself. But what are your thoughts on horror sci-fi? There was a controversial tweet some time ago where someone said you can't mix the two. There's nothing horror in science fiction. And of course people are like, Event Horizon, Alien, other things. I have mentioned many times I like genre mashups. I am a huge fan of Alien. Great horrific monster movie. Aliens is more of a action movie. Still a fantastic movie, but less, to me, less horror than it is action. Um, Event Horizon, I absolutely love that movie. That is straight up. How you can say that's not science fiction horror, I don't know. Some people online are crazy. Um, I say Terminator is science fiction horror. It's a straight up slasher. Uh, and it's absolutely science fiction. You can't deny that. And it's absolutely a slasher movie. Um, well, I guess it depends. Uh, Stephen Graham Jones might say it's not. He has I think, a very concise definition of what a slasher is, and he is the expert. But I think Terminator's a slasher movie. It's sci-fi horror. So I dig it. Just like with anything else, if it's done right, I enjoy it. And I am a science fiction fan. I'm a horror fan. Throw those two things together in a well-told story, I'm in. But what are your thoughts? Excuse me just a moment. I'm getting all excited, and this is turning into a long video. So I needed to, drink a little something. What are your thoughts? Do you care about sci-fi horror? Do you not? Are you put off? Are you a horror fan that's put off by the sci-fi elements, or vice versa? Doesn't it matter? Does it matter a lot? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here on my channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is at Ronin5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is Eric Smith 5757. That's Eric with a K. ERIKSMITH 5757. That's all I have for you this week. So until next week, read more books.